The world of health and wellness can often feel like the Wild West, but the reality is very different. And understanding how the law affects employers, employees, consultants, coaches is of utmost importance. Welcome to the Catalyst Health, Wellness, and Performance Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Bradford Cooper of the Catalyst Coaching Institute, and today's guest is wellness attorney Barbara Zabawa. She is the go-to person when it comes to applying the laws surrounding health and wellness. If you're thinking about a career as a credible health and wellness coach, you missed our first certification of the year, but we have 3 more on the calendar for 2022. Please keep in mind as you're planning ahead that we keep class sizes very small, so they tend to fill early. All the details at catalystcoachinginstitute.com. And as always, if you have any questions, would like to discuss how it fits into your career plans, your goals, reach out to us. Email is results@catalystcoachinginstitute.com. We're happy to set up a time to chat over the phone. Now, it's time to be a catalyst with wellness attorney Barbara Zabawa on the latest episode of the Catalyst Health, Wellness, and Performance Coaching Podcast. All right. Well, we have the health and wellness legal expert joining us today, Barbara Zabawa. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. This is going to be great.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Now, in terms of here, we both use that phrase. How did you end up making health and wellness the focus of your legal pursuits and legal profession?
Well, it actually goes back quite a long ways. Right after I graduated with my bachelor's degree, I had a 1-year fellowship where I got a chance to go around the world and look at workplace wellness programs of all things. That was kind of what I was interested in. Yeah, occupational health. So I got to visit these huge companies in England and Sweden, the Netherlands, and talk to their medical directors, and was really intrigued by the whole concept of trying to achieve wellness at work. After I got back from my fellowship, I went to public health school and took a lot of courses in health behavior, health education, and also policy. And that's when I was recommended that maybe I think about law school after I got my master's in public health. So I went to law school, but there's no such thing as wellness law in law school. Right. I just felt this tug that I should be doing something different than just the traditional practice of healthcare law. But I didn't know what that was, but I knew I had to find it somehow because this little inner voice just wouldn't shut up. Then thought that maybe I should open my own law firm, which was never in the cards for me. Was never a bucket list item, never something I thought I would want to do, much less do. But I couldn't, once I had the thought popped into my head, I couldn't get rid of it. And 6 weeks later, August 4th, 2014, I started the Center for Health and Wellness Law and really used it as an opportunity to carve out my own path, my own definition of the type of law I want to see practiced, which wasn't being practiced in any of the law firms I'd ever encountered. And then I thought, I should write a book. So I did. I wrote a book that was published by the American Bar Association called Rule the Rules of Workplace Wellness Programs. And the second edition just came out. I've just sort of created this practice area called wellness law. Somewhere along the path, you have a favorite lawyer joke, and we're dying to hear it. So what do you got for us, Barbara? Yeah, what do you call a bunch of lawyers at the bottom of the ocean? Isn't that the answer is a good start,
A lot of overlapping categories. You mentioned a lot of them when you talked about how you got here. So let's just do a hit and run. And I'll emphasize, and you can change my wording here if you'd like, but folks listening, this is not legal advice. This is a conversation. She's given us just some off the top, get you started. So don't treat this for more than it is, but it'll give you a great running start. You can always reach out to Barbara if you want to get some more of this. So let's start with employers. What are some of the biggest legal mistakes in the health and wellness arena that employers are making?
Oh, and that's a great question because of the name of Center for Health and Wellness Law, I often get inquiries from employees. Right. You're thinking that I'm a center that they can go to and ask questions about their employer problems, which is not the type of work that I do. But I do get an inside view then of some of the problems that employers may or may not know that they have. And one of the things that sticks out is incentives, when they start tying incentives to health or wellness goals, unfortunately, employers, with the law right now as it stands, there's no real guidance as to how much of an incentive can employers throw at a wellness activity or an outcome, because the law says, and when I say the law, I particularly mean the Americans with Disabilities Act, says that you can get health information from employees through a wellness program as long as it's voluntary. And when you throw an incentive at getting health information from employees, which is usually involved in wellness programs on some level, is you're trying to collect employee health data, then the whole voluntary nature of it gets called into question. Like, well, I can't really pass up this $100 gift card to answer these questions.
Sure.
And so employees feel coerced, and that's really what a lot of the lawsuits that have been happening have been really about, is the calling into question the voluntary nature of any health information collection by employers, I should say.
Okay. We talk to companies about that all the time. And I think you're exactly right. If you align them incorrectly, if you align them with an outcome that is not intrinsically motivated, it drives nothing. If you tie it to something that introduces people to something they may not have otherwise been aware of, it can be incredibly powerful, which then wouldn't fall into the danger zone that you're talking about. So excellent. That's a great start. So how about benefit consultants? Is it kind of the same landmine there, or there's some different things that the consultants need to be aware of that maybe they're doing, not realizing they're stepping into gray areas?
Yeah. So, and I will acknowledge that a lot of employers use benefit consultants as their go-to resource for compliance when it comes to workplace wellness, because a lot of wellness programs are tied to the health benefit programs. And so I respect that. But one thing that I've learned over the years with benefit consultants is that they're often they often have tunnel vision when it comes to compliance. They think of the incentive laws, like the Affordable Care Act incentive laws, maybe the ADA, EEOC laws that deal with incentives, and then don't really pay attention to all the other laws that exist that are still applicable to wellness programming. Not very well rounded when you consult a benefits consultant unless they've kind of specialized in this area. So it's there's Fair Labor Standards Act issues, there's workers' comp issues, there's state licensing issues, there's of course data privacy and security issues that not just HIPAA. I'm talking about, state level and other federal laws. There's tax issues. There's, other notification issues. If there's any sort of apps or, nutritional supplements that might be involved, you might have FDA issues. So there's just a lot that isn't often addressed. The focus, the laser focus, and the interest even by the clients, not always just the benefit consultants, but the clients too, where they focus on the incentive laws. And those are very important because, again, the lawsuits that you see, that's usually where they're at, is with the incentive laws. But we're forgetting about a whole host of other laws that are implicated when you introduce wellness programming into the workplace.
All right. So let's jump into this next one. EAPs, employee assistance programs. Is there anything in that arena that you're like, Brad, folks are kind of dipping their toe in an area that's a danger zone?
Well, EAPs, actually they can be a safe haven for some wellness programming because they are an accepted benefit. So if you can structure wellness programming through an EAP, you may be exempt from having to comply with a number of laws, like a lot of the Affordable Care Act requirements for, group health plans, EAPs that follow certain parameters, are exempt from a lot of those requirements, like essential benefits and the minimum essential coverage requirements, that the mental health parity types of requirements that often are attached to full-blown group health plans. So so they can be very helpful, but they have to be pretty much watered down. They can't be providing significant benefits. They're more or less a referral service to qualify for that exemption. So they can be a really good way to offer just introductory kinds of services, a starting point for people to then get more comprehensive services elsewhere. And some companies are, using that model to help employers with those kinds of offerings.
Okay, good. That's helpful. And then employee wellness providers. That's U.S. Corporate Wellness started in 2007. There were not a lot of us out there at the time. Now there's one on every third street corner. So that's growing a lot. And I'm guessing those are the companies that often are reaching out to you. What are some of the landmines for the providers?
Yeah, one of the big ones that I often hear is like, who's responsible? So under the law, a lot of the laws that I mentioned, Affordable Care Act, the ADA, the responsible party is the employer or the group health plan itself, not the vendor. Even with HIPAA, it's the group health plan that has the responsibility, although the vendor could be responsible as a business associate. But the employers look to the vendor most of the time for compliance. Mm-hmm. And, so if there's a notice that has to be issued, a lot of them want the vendor to issue the notice, even though the law technically says it's the responsibility of the employer. Mm. And so contractually those issues have to be worked out as who is going to take on that responsibility. And a lot of times the vendor will take that on to get the business, but even though technically they're not the legal entity responsible under the applicable law.
Interesting. Okay, good. All right, let's talk more generically about attorneys for a minute. If someone needs to consult with an attorney, what advice would you have for them besides calling you directly?
If someone needs to consult with an attorney?
Yeah, what would be some tips to find the right person? What should that first conversation look like? It feels like, especially for an independent practitioner, it probably is a little harrowing. It kind of feels like, I don't even know what to ask. I don't know how to find somebody. There's all these weird TV shows about attorneys. There's these billboards everywhere. What would be your advice to find a legitimate, trustworthy attorney? First
of all, would request that anyone looking for an attorney have a pretty good idea of what they want their business to look like first.
Okay.
I've had clients reach out to me prematurely, where, they have this grandiose idea of what they want to do, but really haven't dug in and done the market research, written a business plan, done those preliminary things that are really, really essential before hiring an attorney. Because an attorney, once you know what you want to do and where you want to go and how you want to get there, the attorney can help you get there in a compliant way. But if you have no notion, unless the attorney is willing to give you like a little bit of a free consult to maybe guide you, and a lot of attorneys do. I know I do that for 15 minutes. It's not very long. Otherwise, you're going to be paying for time, because that's how attorneys earn their money, is it's their time. And you may decide ultimately to go in another direction and may feel like, oh, all that time and money that I wasted contacting an attorney. So and there are, I just suggest that having a clearer vision of what you want before you reach out to legal counsel, unless you can find someone who can give you a free consult while you're in your preliminary stages, and then maybe go back to that person once you've fine-tuned it a bit more.
That's fantastic advice. And I think that's advice, folks, even beyond the legal side. It doesn't matter who you're reaching out to. Obviously, I'm talking to folks all the time that are trying to figure out where they're going with their business and their coaching career and all that kind of stuff. And it's so nice when somebody, they don't have it all figured out, but they have that vision that you're talking about. And so now you can help fine tune it versus helping them create that initial vision. So great stuff.
Yeah.
So we have a great attorney we work with for 15 years to write and review contracts, but the cost adds up. So what are things coaches, we're talking to the individual coaches now, on a budget can do either on their own or maybe some online resources to get started? And then maybe they come to you later with that before, as they start to get their arms around the details. Are there some starting things that they can do? Are there some legitimate online sources that might give them some templates to work with? What is your advice there?
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you asked that because I'm in the midst of creating templates.
Folks, I didn't know that. She didn't flip me a $20 bill or anything for this one.
I hope to have it available starting in the beginning of 2022.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So, and that is something that I recognize because I do get a lot of coaches who contact me who are on a budget. And I understand that as a startup myself, I get, you don't have a lot of resources to spread around and you want to use it as wisely as possible. So yes, there are templates that you can use. And a lot of them are sufficient. I know the ones that I'm creating will be very tailored to the coaching industry, health coaching in particular, because, there are some unique circumstances to health coaches that
absolutely.
Business coaches or others don't have to worry about. So, you're going to want someone who's knowledgeable about health and wellness to guide you or to be the source of your tools that you ultimately choose. Because as I tell my students, because I also teach full-time at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee in the healthcare administration program, as I tell my students that healthcare is a highly regulated industry. Even if you're working on the periphery as a coach or an alternative type care provider in functional or integrative medicine or Reiki or energy, you're still having to confront healthcare laws at the state and federal level that can get you into trouble. A lot of state laws, when this is really going towards scope of practice and licensure, coaches aren't licensed. They're not recognized as a licensed profession by any state. And so making sure that you are staying within your coaching lane and properly advising your clients or prospective clients that you are not practicing any sort of medicine or dietetics or other licensed profession. Psychology is another big one, that you are just there as a coach and making sure that language is really, really clear for both you and your client as just a huge risk mitigator. And so that you really want to make sure that those kinds of statements are there, acknowledgement about HIPAA stuff, which doesn't always apply, and just having someone knowledgeable about the landscape of the healthcare world that you are teetering on the edge of as a coach.
So definitely send me that link. We'll include as soon as it's ready, and we'll add it to the podcast, even if it comes out afterwards in the description. So folks, this is that was her insights of what's coming is probably worth just hearing this. You're like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. Have you seen any difference between the coach that's been through the MBHWC certification process, that has a scope of practice, that has a code of ethics? Have you seen that kind of gives that coach a running start because they're required to know all those things before earning that certification versus the person that's coming in saying, hey, Wild West, let's do this thing?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the people who call me, who reference and
MBHWC,
they are much more cognizant of their role and express more concern about staying within that role and wanting to do the right thing. And that to me is so refreshing, so nice, because those who aren't really knowledgeable about that accreditation or not really caring, are much more cavalier and looking for ways that they can do what they want to do and not get caught. So, I mean, we're here to help everybody, but it takes a bit more gymnastics with individuals who are looking for ways to work around a lot of laws, as opposed to individuals who just want to make sure that they're doing what they're taught to do and staying within that.
Yeah, that's good. And folks, if you're not familiar with that, it's the NBHWC, the National Board for Health and Wellness Coaching. We had the executive director, Leanne Webster, on actually each of the last 2 years. So if you're unfamiliar with that, go back a handful of episodes and you can hear her talking about the future of health and wellness coaching. All right, I've got a number of just kind of quick hit 30, 60-second answers for coaches. Let's just jump into this. What are your suggestions for a coach setting up their own business to work with individuals? Any quick hits? And again, this is not meant to be comprehensive, everyone. I just want to get her top of mind thoughts on each one of these. So suggestions for the coach thinking about to set up their own business to work with individual clients.
Get insurance. There are liability insurers out there.
Good.
Think about setting up your own legal entity, separate your business from your personal life, and make sure you do the research on naming your entity, so that you're not picking a name that is already out there and that's going to get you into trouble. Someone saying that you stole my name. Just from a business standpoint, find your niche. Find your niche.
That was good. I didn't even give you a heads up on that question, but you nailed it. Good job. All right. One of the things that you mentioned was your legal entity. Why is it important to form an LLC or whatever happens to be best for you? Obviously, you've got S Corp, C Corp, et cetera, but LLC or similar. Why is it important to do that?
Because it protects your personal assets. If there is ever a problem and anyone ever tries to accuse you of wrongdoing, they would be accusing your business and not you personally. And if any sort of remedy was available to that person, they wouldn't be able to touch your house or your car or things that are not owned by the business. And so that legal separation, both from a monetary standpoint, protecting your valuables, but also protecting your personal name, your personal brand. It's your LLC that would be in trouble, not necessarily you. From a reputation standpoint, it could also be very helpful.
Good. Excellent. Similar line, you mentioned insurance. Thank you for mentioning that. You've got a couple of options. You've got professional liability insurance. You've got personal liability insurance. Can you walk us through the difference between those two and why they matter? And does the coach need both or one, or what are your recommendations on that?
Well, I think you mean there's professional liability insurance and then general liability insurance. So professional liability is really covering mistakes you make as a professional.
Okay.
As a coach, so decisions that you make. Whereas general liability is important, especially if you're going to have like a brick and mortar kind of facility where you're going to see people. That's going to cover things like slips and falls and damage that occurs because of the actual building that you're in or something along those lines. But professional liability between the two is definitely the most important.
Okay. Very good. Excellent. Initial consent forms. Any quick hit suggestions on consent forms they might want to consider using?
Yeah, well, to be an effective consent in the law, we teach in healthcare. We say it has to tell you give you a good description of what you are getting as the client, what the alternatives are to what you would be getting, what the pros and cons of the alternatives are, what the risks are of the service that you are choosing, and whether and it should be signed by the client, so it's acknowledged so that they actually have read it, and it's not like a notice form. It's actually something that they have to read through and sign.
Okay, good. And then the contract, again, we'll have the link to your site that'll have some templates that'll be available. Top 2 or 3 things they want to make sure they're including in any sort of an agreement they create with their clients or potential clients.
They should have a very clear scope listed in their contract. These are the scope of my services, and these are not what I'm going to be doing. And especially with health and wellness, you want to make that very clear. And then I also think having something about the risk, so the client agrees that I'm taking on this risk freely, voluntarily, and I'm not going to hold the coach responsible if anything goes wrong. That those are important items that should be in a consent form.
Okay. What about working with minors? A parent contacts you and says, my teenage son is doing such and such, or my daughter would really benefit from this. Guidance along those lines? What needs to happen there?
Well, minors aren't old enough to sign an agreement, so you'd have to get their parent or legal guardian to sign on their behalf. Yeah, I mean, minors are tough because the client relationship is with the minor, but the payment is usually coming from the parent. And so it can get tricky, depending on the type of coaching that you're doing, of course, but you want to be respectful of your client, the minor, assuming the parent isn't attending sessions with them. The parent could get nosy and ask for information. And even though HIPAA might not apply to you directly as a coach, you could use HIPAA in this case as a guideline where you should only be disclosing to the parent the minimum amount necessary that they need to know to pay the bill if they're paying the bill.
Okay, that makes sense. States, you mentioned different states have different laws. What about things like nutrition? I know that's been one that you've probably been contacted a lot about, is the RDs saying coaches can't do this, and the coaches saying, well, maybe I can, and the law stepping in. Any guidance for that side of things?
Well, there's good resources out there that show states that are more restrictive when it comes to nutritional counseling than others. And I don't have the states memorized, but there are some states that allow people who don't have a license to practice dietetics, for example, to still, for a fee, give advice on nutrition as long as some disclosures are made. California is one of those states, and I think Minnesota as well.
Okay.
But other states prohibit use of the titles, certain titles, like dietitian or nutritionist, or, it'll be in the state statutes. And other states just care about what you're doing. Are you giving nutritional advice? And if you are, and you're not licensed to do so, then you could be in trouble. And I know states like Ohio and Florida have been active in the past, the licensing boards, going after people who are giving nutritional advice who aren't licensed to do so. So it's not uncommon. It really is going to vary on what exactly the state licensure board is saying that you can't do. Call yourself a certain title or do certain things in your practice for a fee.
Okay, very good. Last one, any specific things people with dual credentials? So, for example, a coach who's also a counselor, a coach who's also a nurse, a coach who's also a physician. Any things that would be helpful for them to keep in mind as they move forward?
Yeah, for people who actually have a license in the state to do certain practices, it can be trickier for them because they do have the training and knowledge that can cross state lines. And a lot of people that I see, using telehealth, virtual platforms to deliver services to all 50 states and even beyond. But they're only licensed to practice nursing or medicine or whatever in one state. And so if you are one of those people and you want to continue practicing as a nurse or as whatever licensed profession you have, that you have a separate website, separate business, even for your licensed practice from your coaching practice.
Okay. Very good. Barbara, this was excellent. We should have brought you on a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. We need you. Thank you for doing what you're doing, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It was fun.
Well, knowing the hourly rates for attorneys, I think we all need to send Barbara a check in the coming week for her consult. Now, seriously, thank you again to Barbara Zabawa for her valuable insights. We will have a link to her website in the description, and as soon as those templates she mentioned are available, we'll link to that as well. Thank you for tuning into the #1 podcast for health and wellness coaching. We are grateful to have you choose to spend time with us each week, and we appreciate any time you pass the word on about what we're doing here to bring evidence-based health and wellness to the forefront. Next week's guest is Dr. Elise DeMarco, discussing all the intriguing aspects of mom brain. You're going to love it, I can promise you. As always, feel free to reach out to us with any questions about your current or future coaching career or your employee wellness program. Email is results@catalystcoachinginstitute.com. You can tap into additional health and wellness resources on the website at catalystcoachinginstitute.com. Now it's time to be a catalyst. This is Dr. Bradford Cooper, the Catalyst Coaching Institute. I will speak with you soon on another episode of the Catalyst Health, Wellness, and Performance Coaching Podcast, or maybe over at youtube.com/coaching channel.